the Air Force finished a report it never wanted you to read. Behind it was a test Congress had ordered, its newest stealth fighter, flown head-to-head against the 50-year-old attack jet it was built to replace, graded by an independent referee. Then the report vanished, classified, year after year, while the service said nothing. It took a watchdog group, the Project on Government Oversight, and a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit to finally drag it into daylight. And once it surfaced, the silence made sense. The report showed something the Air Force did not want Congress to see, the same thing that has quietly wrecked its plan to retire that old jet again and again for more than a decade. Here's why that's strange. On paper, this shouldn't be close. The new jet is the most advanced and most expensive flying machine ever built. In a close air support fight, it carries about 3 seconds of cannon ammunition. The jet it's meant to replace carries enough for 15 passes. Subscribe to Classified Decoded, where we explain military hardware with simple physics. Because what that buried report found wasn't politics, it was physics, the answer to a question the Pentagon keeps trying not to ask. We're not here to crown a winner. That question is broken on its own. Better at what and where? Change either answer and the winner changes with it. The F-35 Lightning II was built to do almost everything: air superiority, electronic attack, suppression of enemy air defenses, deep strike, reconnaissance, and close air support. 5 jobs, 1 airframe, 1 pilot, 1 brain. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was built to do exactly one thing: fly low, fly slow, stay, and put ordnance on the forces trying to overrun friendly troops on the ground. Underneath the whole debate sits a single assumption: that a specialist is a luxury a modern budget can't afford, and that one platform tuned for 5 missions must, by sheer technological superiority, beat a platform that spent 5 decades perfecting one. It's a clean assumption. It makes a great slide. The trouble is that physics doesn't read slides. And when Congress stopped trusting the argument and demanded a real test, physics is exactly what showed up to grade it. The test had a referee, and it wasn't the Air Force. By law, the fly-off was run by the Pentagon's own independent Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, the one office the service couldn't quietly lean on. The 2 jets flew the same missions back to back: close air support, combat search and rescue, forward air control, the exact work the Warthog was built for, and the exact work the F-35 was supposed to inherit. 69 sorties, more than 100 flight hours, day and night, and the burial itself tells you something. If the F-35 had won this cleanly, the numbers would have been on a press release the next morning. Silence is a data point. So here is what the report actually said. The verdict split on one variable: the threat environment. In contested airspace, where advanced surface-to-air systems own the sky, the F-35 won, and it wasn't close. Stealth, sensor fusion, and the ability to clear its own path got it into airspace the A-10 would never survive. We give it full credit for that. It's real, and it matters. Everywhere else, the A-10 won. More weapons delivered, longer time over the target, better target identification. The tester's own conclusion was that it took more F-35 sorties to produce the same number of engagements the A-10 delivered in fewer. And then there is how they got even that result. The F-35s in the fly-off were flown by experienced A-10 pilots who had crossed over to the Lightning. The Air Force admitted that using pure F-35 pilots, people trained only on the Joint Strike Fighter, would have produced substantially worse numbers, because those pilots had no required close air support training to draw on. To prove the F-35 could replace the A-10, they had to borrow the one thing they were trying to retire: A-10 experience. The field itself was tilted the same way. The fly-off ran over flat desert, China Lake, Yuma, targets sitting exposed on open ground, the exact conditions that flatter the F-35's sensors. No jungle, no urban sprawl, no camouflaged position tucked into a tree line. The munitions were simulated and scored on a screen, not real ordnance with real blast effects. The ground below was empty, with no JTAC on the radio calling corrections under fire. The hardest, most human part of close air support, the trust between a pilot overhead and the troops whose lives depend on him, was never on the exam at all. The A-10 won anyway. So why did the volume favor the old jet that heavily? The answer isn't avionics, it's the magazine. The F-35A carries the GAU-22A, 4 barrels, 3,300 rounds a minute. Impressive, until you count what's behind it, 182 rounds. At full rate, that is 3.3 seconds of trigger time. One long burst or 2 short ones, and the pilot is turning for home to reload. The F-35B and F-35C don't even have an internal gun. They bolt on an external pod, around 220 rounds, that hangs into the airflow and spends the stealth the entire aircraft was built to protect. Respect where it's due. This is by design, and the design is sound. The F-35 was never meant to win a fight with its gun. In its doctrine, the cannon is a last resort, a backup for the day the plan falls apart. The real weapons are precision-guided, dropped from standoff range, long before anyone is close enough to need a trigger. The A-10 carries the GAU-8A Avenger, and the A-10 wasn't built with that gun so much as built around it. The complete system, gun and feed and ammunition drum, weighs about 2 tons. The structure bends to fit it. The nose landing gear is offset to one side so the firing barrel can sit dead on the center line. That geometry isn't cosmetic. The recoil runs to about 10,000 pounds force, on the order of one of the jet's own engines, only pulling backward. Put a force like that off the center line and it would try to yaw the aircraft mid-burst. Line it up through the center of mass and it just pushes straight back. 7 barrels, 3,900 rounds a minute, 1,174 rounds of 30 millimeter. Enough for 10 to 15 passes in a single sortie. The F-35 gets 1, maybe 2. And there, the 182-round magazine stops looking like skimping. A stealth jet carries its weapons inside, in internal volume that is the most expensive real estate on the airframe. Every cubic foot given to a gun is a cubic foot taken from fuel or a bomb. You cannot fit a 2-ton cannon in that bay without handing back the range, the payload, or the stealth that justified building the aircraft in the first place. So the F-35 carries the smallest gun its mission allows, and the A-10 carries the largest gun a fuselage can be built around. The same question about mass. 2 opposite answers. There is a line ground troops have about that gun. If you hear it, you weren't the target. The rounds are supersonic. The effect arrives before the sound does. So when the report found that the A-10 produced more engagements per sortie, it wasn't a mystery. It wasn't better sensors or smarter software. It was arithmetic. 2 philosophies made physical. One jet brings a rifle with 1,174 rounds. The other brings a sidearm with 182, and the sidearm is invisible. 182 rounds, 3.3 seconds. Done. But ammunition is only half of close air support. The other half is whether the pilot can find the target at all. The F-35 pilot wears the Helmet-Mounted Display System, Generation 3, a $400,000 helmet fitted to the individual skull within about 2 millimeters between the pupils. 6 infrared cameras built into the airframe, the Distributed Aperture System, fuse a full 360-degree picture and paint it straight onto the visor. The pilot can look down through the floor of his own aircraft, through the wings, through the tail. It was engineered to see everything. At 30,000 feet, it does. The fly-off found the catch, and the testers had a name for it: symbol clutter. Drop down to the altitude where close air support actually happens, and the visor floods. Threat warnings, waypoints, data link tracks, altitude cues, weapons status, all stacked over the real world. The Air Force has since pushed software to thin the display out, and that's the right fix. But the original problem exposed something deeper. The same information that makes this jet untouchable at altitude becomes noise down low. A camouflaged soldier waving a marker panel on a ridgeline can vanish behind a stack of digital icons. The system built to see everything hid the one thing that mattered. Then there is the glass itself. The F-35's canopy is coated to keep radar energy from leaking into the cockpit and bouncing off the instruments, a stealth requirement. That coating bends light. So every single canopy is laser scanned to build a distortion map, which is loaded into the avionics so the helmet can correct the warp in real time. Read that again. The glass is distorted enough that the jet needs software to fix what the pilot sees through his own window. The A-10 has a bubble canopy, clear polycarbonate, no coating, no distortion map, no correction software. The pilot looks out with his own eyes at 300 knots, and because he is slow, he gets 2 to 3 times longer over the target than a fast mover does. Picture driving 120 miles an hour in glasses that overlay your messages, your music, your navigation, your speed warnings, and a deer steps into the road behind the very notification you happen to be reading. The other driver has none of that. The other driver just sees the deer. 2 millimeters of precision, $400,000 a helmet, and sometimes it buries the one thing the pilot needed to see. But the helmet earns its price the moment the weather turns. The distributed aperture system is infrared and fused. It sees through the darkness, haze, and cloud that leave a naked eye useless. On a clear day, the bubble canopy wins. In weather thick enough to blind that eyeball, the F-35 still sees the battlefield, and the pilot behind clean glass sees nothing at all. Step back, and the two jets are two answers to one law. Survival in the air runs on the energy state, altitude, and speed, so a fast fighter stays alive by keeping it high, while close air support throws it away on purpose to live in the lowest, most exposed state there is. The A-10 was built to survive down there on a titanium bathtub and redundant controls instead of speed, trading energy for the only things the job rewards: time over the target and a clear look at what it's shooting. Here is what neither camp likes to admit. This stopped being an argument about specs a while ago. The battlefield keeps answering the question out loud, and then the budget keeps trying to unhear it. Wherever a modern war actually breaks out, both jets end up flying it, and they sort themselves exactly the way the fly-off predicted. The F-35 goes first, into the contested airspace, suppressing air defenses and striking deep into places anything without stealth would be torn apart. The A-10 takes the low fight that comes after, hunting fast attack boats in a crowded strait, working close air support for troops in contact, orbiting over a downed crew during a rescue. Loiter time, cannon rounds, and a pilot's own eyes matter more down there than radar cross-section ever could. The Air Force needs both, and at some level, it knows it. The F-35 can't do the A-10's job in that fight. Not enough ammunition, not enough time on station, and pilots without the years of low-altitude coordination the A-10 community has built. The A-10 can't do the F-35's job either. It can't survive contested airspace, can't suppress modern air defenses, can't fight electronically while it works. They are not competitors. They are two halves of the same problem. And yet, for more than a decade, the plan has been to retire one to pay for the other. The schedule gets drawn up. The budget gets pointed elsewhere. The Warthog gets its farewell date. And then, the next war shows up, asks for exactly the missions only the A-10 can fly, and the retirement gets pushed again, not out of nostalgia, but because the combat data refuses to cooperate. The jet on its way to the boneyard keeps getting kept alive by the wars it was built for. So if each piece of this tells a different story, what happens when you read all of them at once? Here's the question none of the vectors can answer alone. The F-35 won the fly-off in exactly one place: dense, contested airspace defended by advanced integrated air defenses. The A-10 won everywhere else. Accept that split, and the data does, and the Pentagon's real bet comes into focus. They keep trying to retire the A-10 because they are betting that every future battlefield will look like the one place the F-35 wins, the one ringed by long-range surface-to-air systems and layered defenses. And if that bet is right, every argument in this video flips. No upgrade saves a non-stealth jet flying into a modern double-digit SAM envelope. 1,174 rounds of cannon mean nothing if nobody can get low enough to fire them. In that world, the F-35 isn't just the better choice, it's the only one left alive. But airspace doesn't stay contested forever. That is the piece the bet keeps missing. A stealth jet kicks the door in. It dismantles the surface-to-air systems and blinds the network. The Shadow does what only the Shadow can. And the moment the door is open, the war changes shape. Now it is fast boats, drone swarms, and men with shoulder-fired missiles. In terrain a sensor cannot sort. A low, slow, high-volume fight. The one environment where stealth buys you nothing and a full magazine buys you everything. The Air Force keeps planning the Warthog's funeral, then keeps having to call it off, because the second half of the war keeps showing up right on time. The battlefield simply does not read the Pentagon's PowerPoint. Subscribe to Classified Decoded. We don't sell narratives here, we sell engineering. And the gap between the two is widest exactly where it costs the most. Over a real battlefield, with real crews on the ground. So picture the mission the Warthog was actually built for. A crew is down behind enemy lines. The fast movers that own that sky are already gone. Fuel low, loiter time spent. What the people on the ground need isn't a radar cross-section. They need something that will stay, and something with enough ammunition to hold the ground around them until the helicopter arrives. That mission has a way of arriving right after the stealth jets have done their work and gone home. Once the door is kicked in and the defenses are down, and there is nothing left for stealth to buy. The thing that answers is slow and loud and old, and it is exactly the right tool for the only part of the war that is left. It stays because staying is the one thing it was designed to do. And somewhere in a conference room, a slide is still open explaining why the aircraft that already left was the better one. The question was never which jet is better. The question is what you are willing to lose to find out. And the next war will collect the answer whether the budget is ready or not. So decide. When the airspace is finally clear and the real work starts, do you want the supercomputer overhead or the sledgehammer? Tell us in the comments.